Hello there, and welcome back to our Orlando time-lapse series. In today's episode, we are finally creating the interior of the railroad station. As I told you last time, we reached now 1 year of constant building in this park. We went from the beginnings of this very station here to literally every building that surrounds this main hub. So you could kinda say that today's episode marks off the start of Season 2, if you will. The core foundations of this park here are now in place. And from this point onwards, I just hope that it will be a lot easier to continue. And what better place to start things off again than by starting with the interior of the railroad station. It's not only the most important building in this whole park, since it's the first thing that you will see later on, but especially the attached symbolic value of this whole place, about Walt Disney and his fascination about railroads. It lives and breathes on in this very space here. Who knows if a Disneyland like we know it today would even exist without the innovation of the railroad. When you watch a little bit more about Walt Disney here, I mean there are so many documentations out there about his life, you will start to notice that there is a underlying interest into the world of mechanics, innovation and transportation. You're not only seeing it being part of certain comics like Steamboat Willie or Dumbo, but also much more later in his life when he had the idea for Epcot, experimental prototype community of tomorrow. The innovation of the monorail here is a core central part of this whole idea. And so it's no wonder to me, coming back now to this park here, that those transport systems play a major role in those theme parks. It's certainly no accident, it's intentional. I would even say that they're defining in a way this whole theme park. When you're taking a look on an aerial image of this park, you will see that the loop that this railroad is making defines the outer boundaries of this very park. So at least in my opinion, it's not only a theme park with another railroad, but much rather this railroad is the core foundation of this whole theme park. When you think a little bit about that, what that actually implies, that this thing here, this medium, is the only thing that is allowed to coexist inside all of those different themed areas that is never changing. So for example, if you compare Frontierland with this main street here, the architecture is different, the foliage is different, the actors within it are different, and the whole music is of course different. But the one thing that is not different is this railroad. And so I find it quite remarkable that it's like that. In a way, it's so timeless that this thing can exist in all of those completely different themed areas at the same time without looking ridiculous and out of place. So just by riding this very railroad here, you get a quick overview of the park that would be otherwise not possible. Not in the way that it would be possible with another medium, but in the way impossible because you have this unique experience of having this timeless railroad here. The simple fact that you can travel through all of those themed areas without losing and breaking the immersion in the end, that's the unique thing about it. And coming back now to our park here, because it's so special and unique, I think we have to take especially care about that in this recreation. We can't and shouldn't treat it like every second building on Main Street because of all the things that I mentioned earlier. In the words of Planet Coaster, this means we have to use a lot more pieces for detailing. When we take a pure view on this park right now, half of its pieces is for the railroad station. But I think it's absolutely justified. As we are doing a recreation here, we are not really after a 100% replica of the park. I think that's impossible. As I said it also in the last episode, that's not what we are after here. It's so much more about our interpretation here, how the park is perceived by us, how we feel this place, and when there are things, as I said, that are important to the park symbolically, either to its history or because they are kinda standing out in whatever way, then I think we can adjust to that here in the recreation. I think it's so much more authentic and interesting to replicate a feeling of something than to replicate the thing to 100% like it is in real life. So whenever you see me creating here something, I try to follow that, trying to make up an impression of this place and decide what elements have to be there in order to achieve that feeling. As I'm creating the interior right here, the things that make up this space, for me at least, when I look on those reference images, it's the stark contrast between all those wooden ornamentations that you see and the almost white wall color. And maybe the third thing would be the floor here. But basically those three things make up this space, and when they are there, even if they aren't looking as detailed as in reality, you get more or less the same attached feeling with it. I mean, there's also the part of detailing and proportion and that everything blends into each other nicely. But so far, whenever I created here something, the first thing that I looked after is to achieve more or less the same feeling. I could imagine that later people, when they see all of this here, that they are so much more excited about all of this because they remember being there in reality. They know how this place feels like. And very hopefully when they playing this park, they get a very similar feeling as well. But maybe at this stage, let's talk a little bit more about the station interior here. When you look carefully on the reference image, you can see that the proportion of those interior walls doesn't really match with what we have now in the game. Especially this wall section right here is a lot wider than it actually should be. And the windows on the side are in our case stepped into the background. When you look back on the reference image, you can see that only this middle section is emphasized and the windows that are on the side are on the same depthness like the walls around it. Now there were a couple of reasons that forced us to use now a somewhat in-between solution. The first one being the brickwork. We used on the outside those brickwork wall sets that are limited in their scaling by 50%. And because it's a brickwork, you have to stick to that scaling, otherwise the texture on it will scale with it and then everything looks off in a way. But because you have those back and forths happening on the facade of this building, they define the interior with it. Every wall set that we use on the outside transpires to the inside. And the only way how to deal with it is to cover it up then with some art piece for the inside walls. So that's the main reason why you see a slightly different layout than in reality. It would have been very great, of course, if it would match exactly to what we have in reality, especially after giving you that speech on how important the station is. But because it's not really our own fault here, but rather the limitation of the game itself, I don't care too much about it. I mean, when you don't have the reference image right beside it, I think you wouldn't even recognize this. As long as all major components that make up this space are in place, then they transpire more or less the same attached feeling. Having said all of that, if I'm 100% honest to you, it does slightly bother me, because later on you will see that it has some effect on how we position those benches in front of those windows, and also the billboard that will later be exactly in the center of this wall here. But since I don't see any other solution than to completely rebuild this entire station here, I think we just let it like that, and very hopefully it's not that obvious to people. When it came to the construction of this interior space, I asked myself which pieces would look best in this interior. I mean, so far we mostly built on the exterior, with exterior lighting. But suddenly, because we have an enclosed space here that has no direct sunlight, the lighting within this interior works a little bit differently. And because of that, I think that the importance of a texture and a reflective surface plays a much bigger role now in this interior. Especially when you are later in the guest cam, you have a very, let's say, steep angle on how you look on things, especially the floor or the ceiling. And also when you look on this reference image here, you can see that there are spots on the floor and the ceiling that are reflective either. So in the game, especially those plastered wall sets, I think work the best here. Not only is the texture a great mix between rough and smooth, but especially the reflection has a super great semi-glossy effect on it. And the same goes also to the floor. I used here the marble wall set, and it gives you a great reflection as well. So my hope is, when you are standing later on in this interior space, because you have multiple materials here that react differently to different lighting situations, that's what possibly makes this space a lot more interesting to watch. I mean, when you see me right now creating those ornamentations on the wall and later on also on the ceiling, it's oftentimes not possible to stick to a certain texture or material. So for example, this wall here that I created out of art pieces should have the same material like the rest of the wall, so the plastered wall set, but that's just not possible in the game. And so in those instances, it's always trying to find a way how you can blend those two materials together, that they seem like they would be a unity. And that's of course not always possible, and as you can see, since we have the torch out, you can tell the difference there. When I think back to literally every Main Street building we've done so far, whenever there was ornamentation happening, I mostly stick to art pieces. So you have there the same thing happening, where you try to make up the impression, oh, it's the same material like the column or another piece of the wall. So something in reality that would be made out of one material very seamlessly has to be built now in this game with multiple elements that all have different textures, reflections, and where you could almost say they really weren't designed to be used in that way. As I'm saying this, I think I had something similar to that already, where I kinda want people later on, when they are looking on another building here, oh, it's a column and a proper window and all of those different architectural elements, rather than to dissect all of them into plain coaster elements. If you're a little bit deeper into the building side of this game, then you probably do it anyways. Whenever you see somebody creating something in plain coaster, okay, what pieces did he use for something very specific? But that's exactly what I hope people aren't doing in the end. I hope that people, when they see the park later on, are so convinced by its immersion and the whole scene of it, that they are kinda reminded back even to the park in real life, by getting more or less the same feelings. So every time I'm creating here something, I'm trying to follow that, and to avoid any spots right here in this park where you lose the immersion. Like in those real theme parks, we have here the same rule set applying. We don't want anybody to look behind the curtain. I mean, surely that's also part of the fun of having this whole theme park in a video game, but the initial first impression that anybody has and ever will be in the future when they first see this park is, I think, a very precious moment. And therefore I think that everything should be geared towards this immersion, that you have there a quick moment of magic happening. And so while I'm completely going off the rails here, what I initially want to say here is just, everything that you see in reality in this theme park, in this Main Street and also in this interior, was intended in its design to perfectly harmonize together. Whenever we are trying to create something here in this game, we have to create something by combining many different things that weren't initially intended to be used in its design. So since you have this imbalance here, no matter how hard you are trying, in order to recreate something here, there's just a natural cap on what is possible. And so whenever we are trying to recreate here, for example, those columns in this interior, we have to find and make a compromise on the parts of what looks good and accurate to its counterpart in reality, but also what looks good in this game visually. Sometimes this process can be very easy and everything works out great, but at other times it can be a complete disaster and you look endlessly for something that looks halfway good. Coming back to our example with the column here, in order to find this sweet spot, we have a number of ways in this game how to achieve it. The most obvious one that comes to mind is of course finding the right piece for it. Right here I used the wooden chamfered column that we also had in the prequel. It's of course a lot less detailed compared to the thing in reality, but you have more or less the same material properties. It's made out of wood, it's a little bit more shiny and reflective, it has this distinct lacquered effect on it, and it fits great with the color value to all the other things that we already have in the scene. So whenever you are trying to recreate something here, this selection process of finding there a good enough piece that fits to what you have in reality, I think it's most effective. But I also say this because we are working the whole time in this interior space. Comparing it to an exterior place, this whole area we are working on is constantly lit artificially. And I think we can make great use out of that since we have control over its illumination. Earlier I told you about the two sides of this station, where we had Artshapes instead of plastered wall sets. So since we don't have here any daylight interrupting us, we can perfectly blend those two surfaces into one by intensifying the light within it. Now I say this with a little bit of caution, since when you switch from day to night, you still have there a little bit of different light settings, but I don't think that they are caused by a little bit sunlight coming through the window, but just by the skybox of how light is simulated in this game. For example, if you are playing out with the graphical settings of this game here, you will quickly find out that the global illumination setting causes a tremendous change in lighting and how you perceive shadows than any time setting that you set later on in the game itself. So for instance, in the prequel, when I did Space Mountain, since this whole thing is a dark ride, you can only imagine how badly lighted this whole area would look like if you would have there the wrong settings. In the prequel this was especially bad since the game had a far more simplified lighting system than we now have in this game. But even here in the sequel, I would say, depending on your graphical settings, you have a complete different experience on how things look in the game. Since we are the whole time in this interior, if you take a deeper look on the floor here, you can see there a very shiny reflection happening, where you almost see the mirrored environment around it. Now if you have set the screen space reflection setting wrongly here, you wouldn't see this effect. And the visual appearance of this space, how I intended it to look like, it gets in a way altered, and I can't literally do anything about it other than to get very vocal about it. But that's of course the thing. Every person has a very different setup. Depending on your device, your monitor, the refresh rate, the resolution, the brightness, the contrast, literally every setting that you can take now, it will give you a very different experience. So it's impossible to give you the exact same visual perception of how I see this game in front of me at your place. To counteract this effect maybe a little bit, I always work on a color calibrated monitor right here. It means, at least to me and my eyes, all colors on reference images or the game itself should be correctly. So even if you watch this on a device that is completely off any calibration, it shouldn't matter that much. The only thing that would be left of replicating what I'm seeing would be then the graphic settings of this game. At some point I might make a video about that. But maybe at this stage we should come back to our interior here. I mean, so far you could see that I skipped a little bit of the time-lapse by only showing you one side of it. I mean, this whole space here is very symmetrical, and I don't really see any point in showing you exactly the same thing a second time. So far we covered up the interior of those walls, the ceiling of it, and then the support structure that combines both of them together. Right here you see me creating the ornamentations on this flooring. For that I used also marble wall sets in the smallest scale that you can set them. To be quite frank, I don't like so much the repeating texture that you can of course see. But at the same time, imagine using any other piece that doesn't have this texture will look even more bad, and so I think it's just a lesser evil here. Sometimes you exactly encounter those situations where you don't have any choice. I mean, you have to put something here, otherwise on this very prominent spot it would absolutely look ridiculous. At least now with this color change I think it's a lot less annoying. So right here I'm working myself to the very center of this ornamentation. We have here like a star-shaped arrangement, and I was so happy to use the piston here for the symmetry. It's not so much about having this thing 12 times then copied around, but much more the creation process, to see those 12 sides in real time. That's the thing. Now in theory, also this star element should be completely part of the floor itself. And so in this case we have to build it out of Artshapes. But since it's so unique and directly in the center of the room, I think it doesn't really bother that much. That's still something I would absolutely love to see in this game. It's the same thing that Taggy also mentioned in his video, that you could actually apply textures onto those Artshapes. And maybe they could even have their custom reflection or opacity. But I think the biggest potential would be in illuminated ones. Then you could create your own lamps and lights. You wouldn't be any more bound to those pre-made ones that we have in the game, that are, at least in my opinion, extremely limited in their versatility. Literally every light you have here is super themed. Maybe with the exception of one that I'm just placing down now, that I will use in a short bit to create those chandeliers in the interior. This little innocent light that is not even called a light in the game might be one of the most useful pieces in the entire park here. It will replace literally every lantern that you will see later on the main street. And so exactly also on this chandelier, I don't think I could create such a thing in the same quality without this piece. So to mitigate this issue, for me it's the most reasonable decision if they would add their multiple art pieces in different materials that would allow complete flexible use on literally everything that you are creating within your park. That not everything looks like a plastic surface. In my opinion, this can only help players in Frontier. Whenever you are trying to create something, you have to scroll endlessly through all of those different wall sets to finally find the one that you like. But then you just create like your little structure out of art pieces, select all of them and pick a texture you like. Of course, there would be some issues where you have to deal with repeating textures, where they kinda collide into each other because they are not perfectly aligned to the grid or to their axis. But at least you would have the flexibility and freedom to use them for any purpose. And the thing why I'm saying it also helps Frontier, when people can create literally every architectural design they like to, with all the freedom of using any texture they like, they don't expect to see them in any new DLC or expansion pack. Once you have a broadband of a versatile art shape in the game with different textures, there's no need anymore for any wall set whatsoever. They don't clutter up anymore the whole browser. Whenever you bring on a new update or DLC just focus on those unique scenery themes. That's what people are excited about. Not to introduce new war sets into the game that again only clutter up the content browser, just use those new textures and add them to the texture pool of those art pieces. At least then you would have a smart way in how you create most generic structures. As I'm thinking about this all a second time, it would be quite a significant change to the whole building system in this game, and at the current state of the game where it is, it wouldn't be the smoothest continuation by far. And actually, right now, as I'm talking, we have the end of November. They have announced that they bring the 8 update on the 4th of December. And to be quite frank, I'm so happy about Frontier right now than I probably never was, since they will finally do it by bringing snow into this game. And not only that, also thunderstorms, which I'm also pretty excited for, since, as you know, we are building within Florida, where the weather is not always nice. For those two new weather conditions will hopefully add a lot more excitement and mood-shifting experience in the park's future. So far, whenever you see the park, we always have a very lovely and friendly, nice, sunny day. But I'm especially hyped for those thunderstorms, not only because they introduce thunder and storms, but rather because I believe they have to adjust the skybox of the game itself. So far, every time you look throughout the day, we have the same shadow behaviors happening. Even if it's raining, at all times you are kind of thinking, okay, the sun is up. And so from then on, I truly hope that they found some technical solution there, how they can alter the skybox of the game to make those shadows also disappear through the day. If you don't have there any sun around because you have cloudage happening, then you only end up with diffused light. And that's hopefully what we are going to see then, since it will look so much more convincing and realistic. But even if that's not the case, I'm just so hyped on seeing our park here covered in snow. Back when they released Planet Zoo in 2019, that was the #1 feature that really sold me. I wished I could have that in Planet Coaster back then. And so in the end, it took nearly 5 to 6 years now until it's finally reaching Planet Coaster 2 on the 4th of December. At least to me, I'm so over the moon with that. You can't really make a better Christmas gift than that. But at the same time, I'm also not quite sure why I'm so fascinated about that. In a very weirdly way, it reminds me to my own childhood when I rushed outside to just being surprised about the occasion that it snows. In a very childish way, it's like you're entering a complete different world. On one side it's the same, but also not. But I'm guessing it's also just a technical fascination how this works in a video game. I'm not completely 100% sure of how they implemented it now in this game, but I'm assuming that they use there some sort of a directional map that gets applied to each 3D model that you have in the game. And it kinda gives this model then a 3D orientation for its texture, so that you can determine whether a surface is flat or angled, and depending on that, snow can fall or not. I might have a hard time explaining it properly to you here, but I think it happens to landscaping too. So whenever you are dragging out some landscaping, you can also see there that on very steep angles you get some rock texture, and on all flat surfaces you have grass. So I suspect that they are using there somewhat of a similar technology. When I saw the announcement video a second time, I noticed in every shot where you see now snow happening, that you have there snowflakes falling. So I truly hope that they thought that in to also provide there another mode where you only see stationary snow without any flakes at all. Now I don't have anything personal against snowflakes, but it's just a thing, as you see it also in this video, since they are of course visually way bigger than they would be in reality, I might fear that they are way too big in contrast to my buildings I have here. Everything that I have built so far in this park here, I built to one-to-one real-life size. Comparing that to the average scaleness of your Planet Coaster building, it's way smaller. And when already the snowflake seems a little bit big in contrast to those Planet Coaster buildings, well, guess what? It will be quite a big chunk of snow gonna fall. But who knows how this will look like later on. I mean, it's not long anymore until we find out. But aside from that, I mean, come on. This whole update here and the implementation of snow, I mean, maybe the biggest update of them all in this year. And I'm saying that without even telling you what is in the rest of this update. It's not only snow, it's actually the return of the festive theme, which is so huge. We will get there, maybe one of the most important pieces back that we need for this park. I'm not talking about the infamous pipe element, but rather about the recolorable light strip in a flat variation that is even scalable on top of it. So you see, there are quite a number of things that will return here that will be absolutely useful in the creation of this park and also in the display of this park. So my hope is that it's not only useful for us here, but especially for literally every player that is out there. They can finally create their Christmas-themed winter wonderland. But aside from that, maybe so much more importantly, when you are finally able to see your park now covered in snow, I think that's the big thing. It triggers this curiosity how your park will look like. And so I'm almost certain that this will result then in returning players. Even if they only play it for half an hour, they at least touched it again and it doesn't dust off in their Steam library. I think that's exactly what we need to the end of the year right here. We need that positive sign of them. Okay guys, we are still here and we keep working on this game for you. And maybe you sparkle their interest in whatever way by just adding snow into the game. At this stage you could probably start endless discussions why certain features weren't in the game already at launch, or where you don't like to see features being advertised as new because they should be initially part of the release itself and so don't make a big thing out of it. But I honestly don't care anymore about anything like that. I'm just so happy that they kept on going despite all of those negative things that people have said, including myself. I mean, I also was very vocal about certain things. On parts I absolutely stand behind that still, but on some things I completely can't make up my mind why I thought the way I did back then. But I think, despite of any opinion that you might have here, that's absolutely natural. We are human beings after all. It would be against our nature to have all the same opinion on something. And therefore I think, since we are approaching Christmas, it's time right now for healing and coming together and enjoying what we have here, rather than to again nitpick on super secondary things that doesn't really get us anywhere. I think it's absolutely necessary to have their honest and objective critique about this game. I think even it's necessary to improve it on the long run. But sometimes, sometimes I catch myself by ruining my own enjoyment while I'm playing the game, by having a somewhat entitled or perfectionistic view on it. I mean, I'm like a child. All of those things, I want them now, and I want them in the utmost possible state as they only can be and probably never will be. And if you have that mentality, of course, you never reach a point where you are truly happy. You are locked away and imprisoned into that never-ending spiral of doom, of thought improvement, that in a way doesn't even exist, but you are just so locked into it in your own thinking that you can't imagine another side of the story. When you are only in your own little bubble here and see the things through a very narrow lens, then you never can see the whole picture. And so in the end, I'm telling you all of those things here because I noticed myself that I'm at times behaving exactly like that. It really doesn't help me. It only makes things so much worse, to the point that I'm ruining my own enjoyment of all of this here. And that's the worst decision that I can only make. So at least to me, I had to learn to just sometimes don't give a flying F about something. And that's in a way also my recommendation for anybody out there that might be in the same pickle. Do not think too much about it. Just try to enjoy. And that's that. So let me welcome you back to our little real-time section here. As of recording this, today is the 1st of December. There was quite a big time gap to the last episode, almost like 3 or 4 weeks. That's of course something that I don't like very much, that we have here 2 long breaks in between those videos. But as of now, there are sometimes just things that you have to take care of, and they are kinda distracting then from this park here. As you probably know me, I'm always more towards the quality of the episode rather than to push anything out too quickly. But especially right now on Planet Coaster, it happens quite often that I'm recording something 2 weeks ago, and by the end of the episode, it's in a way completely redundant and outdated. As I'm speaking, literally in between this episode, they not only announced the return of the festive theme and the 8 update, but also this little announcement of the toy pack that will come with it on the 4th of December. As of now, I will not go into the details of that. I spare it for the next episode when I then have also experience firsthand on all those new things. But it's just amazing, you know, seeing so much content being added to the game right here at the end of the year. It's absolutely amazing, and alone the fact that from now on that we will have snow in the game, it's still so mind-boggling to me. And the best thing of it, we don't literally have to do anything. We just enable it like that, and we can enjoy our park in a complete different feeling. Now I probably should now talk about our real time here. When you carefully watch this episode, then you might saw there are spots where I'm actually way more ahead than we are right here in this time lapse. This means in the interior, the chandeliers, the benches, but also the billboards all came later on, literally like 2 or 3 months later on. And that's also the reason why you see now a save game here that is much more advanced in its progression. There are certain things that are completely new, like those vaults here that I started to revamp. But in fact, as I'm speaking just to you, I'm very deliberate in what to show you, since I have here things in the park that you are definitely not meant to see just yet. Having said that, a couple of things you could already see where I'm right now in the process of reworking those Esplanade buildings and also the outer walls of this station. All of that got created somewhat after release, and back then we still had a lot of limitations in the game. And so I think it makes sense then from time to time to revisit their certain spots by matching the level of detail with all of the different pieces that we have by now. So as we are in this interior space, I really have to say that I'm absolutely in love with how this whole thing turned out in the end. Especially regarding the lighting here, I was concerned that they might overexposure this place like crazy, which is luckily absolutely not the case, and we have a very balanced, warm tone in it. As of now, the only thing that bothers me slightly is whenever you have nighttime happening, that the color temperature is changing to a lot more colder tone. And so this would be really the cherry on the top if we could animate them as a proper light, and to set them also in the display sequencer to change color depending on a specific time of the day. And the extra cherry of that would be, of course, to have there 2 different separate color channels for day and night. Then we could have endless freedom here in how we illuminate this park. But again, it's only a super small thing. So far we spend anyways 99% of our time on day. But eventually, in the very far future, we might get to the point where we actually have to care about how this park will look like at night. As I'm saying that, now with the 8th update coming our way, it's in a way extremely essential for making a proper night setup here. Without this recolorable light strip, I can't think how we realistically can illuminate this park, especially the main street. When you see the main street at night, in reality, you exactly know what I'm meaning here. And so far, when we consider every lighting in the game, it's either too themed or it overexposures like crazy. So all my hope is on this little innocent light strip. Back in the day, it was only a 2D sprite, so like a transparent image that is just cut out. In that way, it was extremely performance friendly. It was literally only one polygon. In the prequel, I completely cluttered up the whole main street with that, and in 2 to 3 days, I might completely do the same thing now to this park as well. Who knows? So as we are further strolling around the park here, I would like to talk for a second about the means of how I record things here, since something severe has changed. Up to this point, I always was used to a 1440p monitor, and everything that you see here I built on that monitor. However, when it came to the actual recording, I always recorded in 1080p. Now there were multiple reasons why I did so, mainly the reduced file size, but also just the fact that within those time-lapsed videos, I only showed the time-lapse itself, and at least for that I thought the resolution would be okay. Now since I added then also a cinematic and this real-time section here, I think that the visuals play a much more bigger role when you see this whole thing here. And this kinda led me now to the decision making to not only present this park in 1440p, but also 4K. So from this point onwards, you will see me always build on a 4K monitor. I want to be future-proof in a way. Having said that, I will record the time-lapse in a downscaled variation and then upscale it later on to reduce the file size. But the actual cinematic and also the real-time that you are just seeing here is truly 4K. In that fashion, I hope that we get here the highest fidelity that you only can get on YouTube, by at the same time maximizing the file size efficiency so that my poor old hard drive doesn't blow to pieces. Coming back now to our park here, our lovely railroad arriving here at the station, and you can see all of those guests now entering it. It's still the thing where they completely collide with the fencing of the station. I'm really not sure how we will deal with that, other than by removing those columns that are in reality of course there to hold this canopy above it. I mean, we could remove their 3 to 4 columns in the middle, but in a way that's also not a great idea, since you will see it when the train is not in the station. As I'm thinking about it a second time, now since Taggy brought out another of his ingenious ideas how you can make things invisible for a certain amount of time, maybe we can do something like that here. When we maybe add there a trigger point 10 meters in front of the station, that those fences get temporarily removed until the train departs from the station. So you see, there are maybe possible ways in how we can deal with that. At some point, as I said, we will come back to all of those things that we have created in the first 10 episodes of this series here. And who knows, maybe in 1 year from today, we could say the same thing most certainly again. With every new update and DLC coming, we will have so much more possibilities and ways how we can deal with things in this recreation. So on the very end of this episode here, I think we can confidently say that we reached another milestone in this park. Having now a proper functioning interior space within this railroad station will boost the immersion later on tremendously. It's not only the first thing that people will see later on, but it welcomes them and hopefully makes them so much more excited about everything that follows next. So with having said those things here, you may ask how we will continue after this. Following the building logic of what we have created so far, the most natural continuation would be to start with the main street itself. And so before we are just doing that, we need to add one more crucial part of this main hub. I'm pretty sure that you can already figure out what I'm about here. And so as always, this will conclude today's episode. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you did, subscribe, like or comment. Consider becoming a member on this channel to gain pre-access to the park, join our Discord server, watch my other videos about Anaheim or Orlando, and thank you for watching. See you next time. Bye.